keeping with the theme, talking about Ukraine, Sean Penn went on Sean Hannity's. The Seans got together, Sean Hannity and Sean Penn, to Two Sean's show. And Sean Penn, I always thought like his heart was in the right place. And I could understand he was annoying because of all the annoying things he does. And I didn't start to dislike him until he was pro-vaccine mandate. And he, again, used all the bad logic. He didn't know the science. He thought that you could vaccinate your way out of this, just like everybody who was for the mandates thought that there was a way to, if enough people got vaccinated, we'll get rid of coronavirus. That was never the case. It is never going to be the case. And all you're doing is being a right-wing authoritarian and screwing over workers. And that's what Sean Penn did with his mandate. And so that's when I became an unfan of Sean Penn's. And now it gets even worse. Now he's got an NGO. What's the NGO called that he works with?
CORE, and you can see it on his little patch on his fake, fake military Zelensky jacket.
Yeah. So now he's over in trying to get... he's on the side of NATO in Ukraine. So he's actually doing damage. He's actually going to cause more suffering for the people of Ukraine than they would have to go through if a guy like Sean Penn wasn't involved. Sean Penn thinks he's helping the people of Ukraine. He's actually a useful idiot for imperialism and NATO power. And that's what he's doing. And let's watch what he says.
In those early hours, I know that Trump gave them javelins. I know that they had some defenses. But if you go back to the Budapest Agreement, they were at the time the third largest nuclear power in the world. And they made an agreement that they'd give those weapons to Russia to be destroyed in exchange for protection from Russia, Great Britain, and the U.S. Lesson to be learned here, don't give up your nuclear weapons if you have them, because you can't believe people like Vladimir Putin.
Well, even countries that have nuclear weapons can remain intimidated to use them. And we're seeing that now with our own country. And I fear what that legacy is going to be. We don't...
So I don't know if you just heard what he said. I'll repeat it. Well, let's just play it back.
No, well, even countries that have nuclear weapons can remain intimidated to use them. And we're seeing that now with our own country. And I fear what that legacy is going.
So us being afraid to use nuclear weapons, he says, the United States not using nuclear weapons, he says he's afraid of what the legacy of that will be. You know what the legacy of that will be, Sean? No nuclear war, and we continue the human civilization project going forward. You know what the result would be if we weren't afraid to use nuclear weapons? The annihilation of every human being on Earth. That's what we're talking about, Sean, who pretends to care about people. But that just goes to show you what a alcohol-addled brain he's using, because that's not a sound mind. What he's literally advocating for is for the United States to not be reluctant to use nuclear weapons. He's saying we can't be intimidated to not use nuclear weapons. He's saying, let's use nuclear weapons. There's no other way to look at what he just said. And that's not going to be censored. There's a guy, if I call for the murder of one person on social media, I get banned. He's calling for the annihilation of the human civilization. That's what that is. That's not being tough against Putin. I'll play it again.
Putin. Well, even countries that have nuclear weapons can remain intimidated to use them. And we're seeing that now with our own country. And I fear what that legacy is going to be. No one wants to see a nuclear conflict.
I don't want to.
Yeah, but guess what? You can't punch someone in the face and say, I don't want to fight. Nobody wants a fight. That's what you're doing. You're telling them, what are you, afraid to use nuclear weapons? I don't want a nuclear war. What are you, afraid to use nuclear? I don't want a nuclear war. What are you, afraid to use them? That guy is mental. He's just as fucking dumb as Sean Hannity. He's even worse because some people listen to this guy. Some people think he's not a moron. Some people think Sean Penn actually knows something because he cares about the downtrodden. Look what he did in Haiti. Look what he did in Haiti. He has no critique of the Clintons in Haiti, what they did to the people in Haiti. He has no critique of that. You know why he doesn't have a critique of that? Could you tell me, Max, why he doesn't have a critique of the Clintons?
He introduced Bill Clinton and praised him as this once-in-a-lifetime leader with laser-like focus who was a brilliant hero at a gala, star-studded gala, multi-million-dollar gala, where I think Sean Penn was being honored for his work in Haiti. I mean, and that was right after, like, we learned about the hustle that the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation ran in Haiti. I mean, it's straight up embezzlement. What did they build? 8 houses that no one lived in? Where did the money go? They were presiding over all the money. They were doling it out partly to Sean Penn's organization, CORE.
This is it. This is what I want you to talk about. Talk about Sean Penn's organization, his non-governmental, his charity. Sean Penn has a charity. It's called an NGO, non-government organization, and they get money from the fucking Clinton. Talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, you said Sean Hannity's actually smarter than Sean Penn. That's right. I mean, Sean Hannity knows what he's doing.
Yes.
Not that bright, but he is like an effective Republican hack. Sean Penn, I'm not even sure if he totally knows what he's doing. You look at the board of CORE, and you have a 3-star U.S. general on the board. What is he doing there? Obviously, they've integrated, and they're using humanitarian aid as a front for military action and infiltration. And then he has one of the key figures from the Clinton Foundation, Clinton operative, also sitting on the board. There's a great piece actually in Whitney Webb's Unlimited Hangout by Vanessa Beeley. It's called Sean Penn and his, what is it actually called? It's called The COVID-19 Celebrity Humanitarianism, Sean Penn and the Great Reset. But it starts out by, talking about Sean Penn's real role as kind of a front man in Haiti and how his organization was being funded not just by the Clinton, I think it was the Clinton Global Initiative, not the Clinton Foundation, and USAID. What is USAID? It's the U.S. government, and specifically it's the U.S. Agency for International Development that works with U.S. intelligence to use aid as a cat's paw for U.S. infiltration. And that's what they're doing in Ukraine. That's what they did in Haiti. And Sean Penn probably has no idea how any of this works. He's just
he's just a moron,
very addled actor, who can barely express himself here and actually winds up calling for the
nuclear war.
Yeah, I mean, this guy loves humanity.
He's such a humanitarian. I mean, you can't be afraid to use nuclear weapons. Holy shit! Here's what he says also when this is 100% wrong. So this is a guy who's just being propagandized. He says, it is clear to me that the Ukrainians will win this. The question is at what cost? They are not going to win this.
He looks like he just went through a war.
Yeah, the Ukrainians are not going to win this. The Ukrainians are being slaughtered now. And we always knew this was going to happen. Here's what Sean Penn tweeted out. By open source, 2 squadrons of F-15s or 16s, that's 12 aircraft with better tech than Russian MiGs or SUs. Quickly trainable, takes 3 weeks to train people to fly one. To Ukrainian aviators would cost private sector buyers about $300 million. Add another $200 million in missile defense for a total of $500 million. One billionaire could end this war in Ukraine. Or, of course, there are add-ons in arming and maintaining blah, blah, blah. He's calling, do you understand if you give them those 16 or 12 aircraft, that's not going to mean Ukraine's going to win the war. That means that the war would be extended and more people will die. So what Sean Penn is doing is advocating for more Ukrainians to die. Because how do wars end? All wars end in one way, a negotiation. They have a negotiation and they have a peace treaty. That's how wars end. So you're going to have a peace treaty with Putin, and we all know how it's going to end. Ukraine's going to remain neutral. That's how it has to end. Sean Penn doesn't know any of this. He doesn't even know that the United States committed a coup in Ukraine in 2014 that set all this in motion. He doesn't even know that.
He doesn't even know that he didn't write those tweets.
Yeah.
There's no way he wrote those tweets.
There's no way he wrote those tweets, right?
I mean, you listen to how inarticulate he is on Hannity, and you look at the content of the tweets, And this is someone laying out a classic CIA operation, using a billionaire cutout to keep their fingerprints off of it in order to fund a proxy war. This is what the CIA does. And somebody else wrote those tweets. Seems worth a think. Okay, I thought about it. It seems like a disaster. It also seems kind of interesting that Twitter allows this. Like, what if I started fundraising for someone to start, murdering my neighbors? Seems worth a think. I would get booted off Twitter. He's pretty much shilling for a gun running operation on Twitter, and that's totally fine.
That's totally fine because they agree with his politics. So here is the leading scholar who in 2015 laid out what we are living in now. So listen to this. What's this guy's name?
Mearsheimer?
Mearsheimer, yeah.
But I actually think that what's going on here is that the West is leading Ukraine down the primrose path. And the end result is that Ukraine is going to get wrecked. And I believe that the policy that I'm advocating, which is neutralizing Ukraine and then building it up economically and getting it out of the competition between Russia on one side and NATO on the other side, is the best thing that could happen to the Ukrainians. What we're doing is encouraging the Ukrainians to play tough with the Russians. We're encouraging the Ukrainians to think that they will ultimately become part of the West, because we will ultimately defeat Putin and we will ultimately get our way. Time is on our side. And of course, the Ukrainians are playing along with this. And the Ukrainians are almost completely unwilling to compromise with the Russians and instead want to pursue a hardline policy. As I said to you before, if they do that, the end result is that their country is going to be wrecked.
That's what's happening.
What we're doing is, in effect, encouraging that outcome. I think it would make much more sense for us to work to create a neutral Ukraine. It would be in our interest to bury this crisis as quickly as possible. It certainly would be in Russia's interest to do so. And most importantly, it would be in Ukraine's interest to put an end to the crisis. Thank you.
So that's also something Sean Penn doesn't know. Doesn't know that the United States has been instigating this, and it's only going to hurt the Ukrainian people, which is what's happening. This was predicted in 2015. This has been predicted for decades, actually. That wasn't just the CIA, the heads of the CIA, people like Pat Buchanan. Everybody knows this. The former defense chief, Bob Gates, who was the defense for Bush and Barack Obama, he said the exact same thing. So now, of course, the U.S. corporate media has no historical memory, and so they just wipe out history, and history started the day Putin invaded Ukraine. That's when they start the story. They don't start it here. They don't start it long ago. This is where they started, and that's why you're a dupe if you're for more military hardware being sent to Ukraine, because it just hurts the people you think you're helping. And Sean Penn is obviously getting his lines fed to him by somebody in the intelligence community.
Yeah. What Mearsheimer said, with the weight of someone who is rated consistently one of the top 10 international relations professors in the country, is something that planners in the Pentagon openly say. We have a piece up at the Grayzone by T.J. Coles, who is an academic who studies how the how the Pentagon functions through training other countries' militaries as an arm of empire, where he analyzes the documents written by Pentagon planners, people in the U.S. Army, and they openly say that Russia is pushing back as the U.S. continues to militarize Ukraine. And they say we should continue to militarize Ukraine more to force that confrontation. Why? Because it forces Russia to direct more of its social budget into its military. It weakens Russia internally, and they hoped that it would create this pressure cooker effect. And I think that a lot of the people who claim to be outraged at Russia, right, biggest Russia haters like Ann Applebaum from the previous segment, I think that they experienced orgasmic levels of libidinal satisfaction when on February 24th, the Russian military went into Ukraine. They got what they had always been wanting. Not going to work out for them the way they think it will, but this is what they have wanted. And they want direct U.S. military conflict with Russia if necessary. But in the meantime, they're happy to fight this war down to the last Ukrainian. They remind me of a lot of the people who were the biggest cheerleaders for the war on terror, who seemed really pretty happy and excited and united the day after 9/11. They knew they were going to finally get what they want.
Come see a live stand-up show or be in Orlando, Tampa, Cleveland, Columbus, Pittsburgh, Las Vegas, Omaha, Des Moines, everywhere. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for our live show tickets. Also, become a premium member, get access to all our extra stuff, and help support the show. See you at a live show. Single tickets now available. Single tickets available.